Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. My name's AJ. I'm your host for today. Thank you for coming on and listening to my podcast. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how the world is speeding up de-dollarization. They are dumping dollars. Every single country around the world is dumping dollars like nobody's business at the moment. And I have facts and figures to prove it. I'm also going to be discussing China, how China is helping accelerate the de-dollarization that's happening around the world. And I'm also going to be talking about what will be the next reserve currency. And it's not going to be the yuan, by the way. So before I start, I want to ask you guys for a favor. If you can kindly like, share, subscribe, and help with the algorithm, make sure you watch the video to the end. It really helps. And also, if you really want to support the channel and help me do this full time, um, you're welcome to join my locals or Patreon. Your support helps keep this channel alive. There has been a few times I have been thinking of quitting because I'm not making enough, but I'm going to try and soldier on because of you guys. So thanks a lot, everyone, for your support, and let's carry on with the show. So many of you are aware, President Xi went to Saudi Arabia a few weeks ago, and he was given an absolutely amazing reception. He was given a red carpet, or shall I say, purple carpet at the airport. He was met by all of the top leaders, and he was given a great, great reception. Compare that to what Biden got. Biden got absolutely nothing, and he got treated like a low level diplomat, basically. And as you can see, he did a fist bump with MBS as well, which was absolutely ridiculous and an insult to Saudi Arabians. So President Xi signed a lot of deals. A lot of stuff were on the for the media. However, a lot of the stuff that were discussed was not disclosed to the media, and I'm talking about things like selling oil using the yuan. I'm talking about security guarantees, talking about weapon sales, talking about Saudi Arabia joining the BRICS. I'm talking about BRICS reserve currencies. Many secret talks that were not to be disclosed to the media were not disclosed. Obviously, these will never be disclosed. So think about this, guys. If you have a brand new girlfriend, you're not going to make a sex tape and send the sex tape to your ex missus or your ex girlfriend. Imagine what kind of issues that would cause. That would cause absolute mayhem, right? And so this is why all of these secret deals are not going to be announced to the media, because this is going to be between China and Saudi Arabia. And if they did start to announce deals, that China signed deals for Saudi Arabia to sell its oil using yuan and stuff like that, the US is not going to stand there and take it. I mean, the last two leaders that dared to do that was Saddam Hussein, and we've seen what happened to him. And the other leader who tried to go away from the US dollar was Gaddafi, and we all know what happened to him as well. So you see, it's not in Saudi Arabia's interest to announce this publicly. So any agreements would be done in private. So the stuff that were disclosed were obviously projects that China and Saudi Arabia are going to be doing. There was also an Arab summit, and loads of projects were signed, loads of deals were signed, long-term deals, and it's in China's interest to basically try and get these deals and oil deals and gas deals signed soon as possible before China opens up fully. Because at the moment they're just coming out of lockdown. And once the economy is back in full swing, they need to make sure they have all the energy, oil, gas available. They do not want to be in a position where EU is at the moment, where EU is basically running around like headless chickens, trying to secure oil deals and gas deals from all over the world, and they can't. So China does not want to be in that position, and they want to be basically setting up long-term deals with the Middle Eastern countries. And as you know, last week they signed a huge deal with Qatar, and also, obviously with this Saudi trip, China has also secured long-term deals with Saudi Arabia. China has also got long-term deals with Russia. There's 3 gas pipelines being developed coming into China. There's already one gas pipe like the Pau Siberia going into China already. There's oil deals with Russia going in and out. So there's huge deals that China is signing with the rest of the world. They do not want to be in that position where the EU is, and this is something that's happening right now, and they are being very smart about it. So in contrast, the dollar is being dumped all over the world. I mean, people are fed up of having the US as the world reserve currency. So what the US has done, they've used the dollar as a weapon, and they've used it as a weapon against the rest of the world. And they have proven to the rest of the world that US cannot be trusted as the world reserve currency. And this is why countries around the world are dumping the dollar at a very fast rate. And this is a chart to prove it. And you can see from this chart, and this is the latest chart available, and Japan is currently the number 1 country which is dumping most of the dollars. And as you can see from US Treasury holdings, they have over 1,078.2 in October 22. Obviously, this has gone down significantly since then. But if you compare that to last year, October 2021, they had 1.3 trillion. And then you go into China, there are 909 billion. And 1 year ago, there were 1065.4. United Kingdom, 638.5. 1 year ago it was 580.2, and you can see, so Japan has dumped over 300 billion, China's dumped over 100 billion or 150 billion, Britain has dumped over 100 billion, and Belgium has dumped over 100 billion. And if you work everything out with all of these countries, we're looking at between 800 to a trillion that's been dumped in a year. And don't forget that most of the economic issues that has actually accelerated over the past few months. The dollar has been getting stronger because they have been increasing the interest rates, which has been making the dollar stronger. And this, in effect, has been destabilizing the local currencies like the yen, like the renminbi, like the rupee, like the pound. So what these countries are doing, they are dumping the dollar just to kind of strengthen their own currencies. And they are doing that, and also China is mainly doing that as well for many reasons. However, there are issues as well. So I'm going to kind of get into that a bit more. So which are the world's most major reserve currencies? I mean, this this was basically done last year, so obviously things have changed. I couldn't find an updated 2022 figure, so obviously this will kind of give you an idea. So as of last year, it was 58.81 world reserve currency of the dollar, followed by euro 20.64, Japanese yen, the pound, and you can see the Chinese yuan slowly creeping up since last year. Currently, I'm pretty sure the figure I read somewhere is gone up to about 5%, and there's many reasons for that, which I'm going to go into in a short while. But the dollar is starting to go down. This was as of last year. So if over a trillion US dollars have been dumped till October 22, that figure will go down significantly. The euro will go down significantly because euro is basically going through a severe case of deindustrialization, and they are really struggling with finding energy and power and gas and oil. So that's going to be going down as the euro is under recession. The Japanese yen has been going down because they are in severe economic issues. Same with the pound. So the only country that seems to be going up at the moment is the Chinese renminbi. And don't forget, 10 years ago, this was almost like 0.1%, which was very small. However, it's been creeping up over the last few years. But I can tell you honestly for a fact that China does not want the yuan to be the world reserve currency. That is not their plan. That is not their goal. They have admitted it many times. They said they didn't want the world reserve currency. However, they are going to be pushing a new world reserve currency coming out of the BRICS countries. And these BRICS countries, they all have one thing in common. They all sell major, commodities, either metals or gas or oil. And each of these countries who have joined the BRICS, they all have something to offer to the BRICS in terms of, if it's Brazil, for example, Brazil sells huge amounts of iron ore, metals, and many other commodities. Russia obviously sells oil and gas. Saudi Arabia, if it joins, will sell oil. China provides rare earth minerals and rare earth metals and stuff. So this BRICS currency is going to be, the people are saying it's going to be based on a lot of rare metals, which includes gold, silver, rare earth metals as well, palladium, and many other, rare earth minerals. And this BRICS currency will be based on those metals. And Saudi Arabia is the last piece of jigsaw, I believe. So once Saudi Arabia joins the BRICS, I believe that the next thing would be to start a world reserve currency, and Saudi Arabia has been the final piece of the jigsaw, as they would say. And you can see the Chinese yuan right now is going up in the world. There's 85% of central banks around the world are keen on holding the asset. So that's happening right now as we speak. So a lot of people may not realize Saudi Arabia is not US's main trading partner anymore. Many years ago it was, but in this current world, it's not. China is number one trading partner with Saudi Arabia with a huge distance. And USA is not even second. I believe it's fifth at the moment. And Saudi Arabia is merely looking after its own interests. And if you look at the history of Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia has always been an oil producer, producing oil for the Western world, because at the time, when oil was first discovered in Saudi Arabia, it was mainly the Western world that were utilizing the oil. And I'm talking about USA, Europe, and mainly the general West. So the East, for example, India and China were very, very poor countries at the time. And they did not need much oil because they weren't very industrialized. So it was mainly the West that was industrializing, and Saudi Arabia made a lot of money by selling oil to the West. And if you went to Saudi Arabia maybe 5 or 10 years ago, you would think to yourself, hang on a second, where the hell did all of this oil money go? Because I've been to Saudi Arabia myself, and I went there about 5-6 years ago, and it was like a third world country. And I'm not going to lie, guys, it was absolutely like a third world country. If you go to Saudi Arabia or if you go to Syria, there isn't much difference, to be honest. And you think to yourself, where the hell did this oil money go? Well, I'll tell you something. The oil money was basically kept by the Saudi family, the Saudi princes, and most of the oil was bought using US dollars. And the problem with US dollars, you can't really do much with it unless you buy US treasuries, unless you buy US stocks, or if you kind of want to invest in US businesses and stuff like that. So that's what the Saudis have done. They basically invested in the West with all of that money. They haven't invested much in Saudi Arabia itself. And this is why when you go to Saudi Arabia, it feels like a very, very poor country. It feels like Iraq or Afghanistan in some areas. And you think to yourself, this should be the richest country in the world. They should be, the amount of oil they've been selling for hundreds, let's say 100 years or so, they should be so rich, but it's not the case. If you compare Saudi Arabia to Dubai, for example, Dubai have been spending a lot of oil money. Even Abu Dhabi, they've been spending a lot of their oil money into their infrastructure. You can see the difference between Dubai and Saudi Arabia. And because of that, Dubai's economy is not based on oil anymore. They have diversified. Their economy is now based on tourism and other areas, and oil, I believe, is only about 12% of its economy. So Dubai has done very well. And I believe Saudi Arabia wants to go along the same route as Dubai. So you have the new leader coming on board. You have MBS coming on board, who's a very young guy. He's a very young leader who's got very new ideas compared to what the Saudi family used to run the country before. So he's got brand new ideas. So he's thought about ways to turn Saudi Arabia into a new Dubai. And you can see from the land space, Saudi Arabia is huge compared to Dubai. And they've got huge amounts of oil reserves, huge amounts of gas reserves. So MBS has basically said he wants to build new cities like Neom, the Line. There's an Octagon city as well. There's many projects happening in Saudi Arabia right now. And we're talking about 7 to 8 trillion. So initially what he wanted to do, he wanted to spend half the Saudi oil wealth on these projects, and the other half he wanted foreign investments. And in the beginning, he was getting a lot of foreign investments from the West. However, the Khashoggi incident basically put a spanner in the works, and all of the foreign investment that he had for Neom project basically pulled out because of the Khashoggi incident, and basically he had zero percentage of foreign investments over the years for Neom. So MBS has decided, he cannot rely on the West for Saudi Arabia's development, and he gets it. He's a new up and coming guy. He knows a lot about the world, and he gets it. He wants Saudi Arabia to basically become like Dubai. The West does not want Saudi Arabia to be developed. And the West wants to keep Saudi Arabia very poor, like they've done over the last 100 years or so. So he's got brand new ideas, and he wants to bring Saudi Arabia to the new century. However, the US is basically trying to stop that. So no investment has gone into Neom, and MBS has decided, you know what? We will put 100% of the oil money into Neom and the line and other projects. The construction of the line and Neom has already started. And if you take it back to last year the oil prices were very, very low. And Saudi Arabia was in the middle of a conflict with Yemen at the time as well. And their oil reserves and their kind of dollar reserves had basically gone down a lot. And Saudi Arabia's dollar reserves is very, very important for its country, because it really does not have an economy outside oil. So, which means that if they do not make much money from oil, the whole system would collapse, because they pay a lot of people a lot of money, a lot of wages for not doing anything. For example, they pay students, and they don't make much money back. It's all the economy is 100% on oil, or used to be like that. So he realized Saudi Arabia has got a big issue in its hand, and it's got huge weakness if it kind of relies on oil all the time, because your economy is based on the oil price. If it goes down, then your country will suffer, and if it goes up, then your country will make money. And if you compare to what happened with the Soviet Union was basically based on the oil and gas economy. They didn't really have an economy outside of that. And when the oil prices crashed, you've seen how the Soviet Union crashed as well after that. And Saudi Arabia does not want to be in that position. So they came very close to collapse last year, and he does not want Saudi Arabia to be in the same position anymore. So this is why they want to keep the oil prices up. They want to keep the oil prices up for a couple of things. Number one, for Saudi Arabia's development. They want to push all that money into Saudi Arabia's NEOM projects, line projects, and many other projects that's going on. And also, they do not want to collapse. They know by keeping the oil prices high, they will not collapse. So over the years, oil prices have been very low because it was only the Western countries that were using oil, because USA and the EU has been kind of only customers that have been using it. However, you've seen the rise of China over the past 30 years, and now you're seeing the rise of India, and also you are seeing the rise of Africa as well, and you're also seeing the rise of Asia, and even parts of the Middle East, and talking about Dubai and Qatar and places like that. And this means that the demand for oil has gone up exponential, a lot, a lot. And that's the problem the West is having right now. Now they're having to fight for oil resources with the rest of the world. And the US itself is pretty much self-sufficient. They do make their own oil. However, this is what you call shale oil. They use fracking to get their oil. The oil that comes out of Saudi Arabia is a different form of oil compared to shale oil. So they still have to import oil from Saudi Arabia and other countries as well. They even have to import Russian oil, because Russian oil is also different from Saudi Arabian oil. And as you know, oil is used for many things. It's not just used for cars and petrol. It's used for many industrial industrial stuff, and lots of chemicals and things like that. So it's not just used for cars. So different oils are required for different things. So USA still has to import a lot of oil from other countries as well. So that's the problem, really. And the problem is MBS, he does not get along with Biden. He had a very good friendship with Trump. And however, Biden came along and he started calling MBS a pariah, and he was doing lots of things to anger the Saudi Arabians, like pulling out the Patriot missiles from allowing the Houthis to attack the oil facilities. USA also took the Houthis out of the terrorism list. Many things. There's a big list of things, obviously all down to the Khashoggi murder. And so they do not get along. So this is the problem Saudi Arabia and US is having right now. So now comes China, and China has obviously, signed a lot of deals with Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is looking after its own interest. So let's talk about some of these deals, shall we? Obviously, we all know that Saudi Arabia is doing a 7-8 trillion project all over Saudi Arabia. And they will need China's help to build a lot of these infrastructure and a lot of these cities. And what I think initially will happen is China and Saudi Arabia will probably agree some sort of, oil for work deal. And this is the same sort of deal that China and Iran has. Iran sells China oil, and China in return helps Iran build its infrastructure and share knowledge, and give lots of stuff that the West doesn't give to Iran, for example. So I believe in the beginning it will be some sort of deal like that, rather than an out-and-out yuan for oil deal. And I believe they're doing that right now. So remember in the beginning when I said that Saudi Arabia has been selling oil to the West for over 100 years, or maybe just under, I can't remember exactly. And so Saudi Arabia is in huge risk because they have been collecting US dollars. They have been investing that and putting it into US markets, stocks and stuff like that. So if one day the US decides to sanction Saudi Arabia, they would lose all of that money they've built over the years. All of it would disappear overnight. You can imagine how much money that is. That is a lot. So this is why Saudi Arabia is looking to diversify. He wants to hold not just US dollars in reserve, he wants to hold other currencies in reserve as well. And it's very, very important for them to diversify, because they are actually right now not getting along very well. And I believe very sooner rather than later, Saudi Arabia will probably get some sort of sanctions from the United States, and that will really, really cripple their economy. So they are looking at investing in other areas. And as you can see from the war in Ukraine, the US, will basically stop at nothing to take away US dollar holdings from the central bank, and Russia has lost over 300 billion of US dollars because US has basically confiscated all of that, and we're still not sure if US will ever give it back. They're even talking about confiscating it for good, and I really, really hope this does not happen. But their actions are basically prove to the world that US cannot be trusted. They can use the dollar as a weapon any time of their choosing, which can destroy your economy. So you might be friends of the US one day, and tomorrow you might not be. I mean, look at Saudi Arabia. Only a few years ago, they were friends of the US, and today they are not. So things can change very, very fast. Even Iraq was a good friend of the US back in the day, and then suddenly they went out of favor. So you can never tell what could happen in the future. So even countries like Qatar and UAE are moving away from the US dollar, and not just it's not just in dollar terms, but also the economy as well. Recently, Qatar has signed a deal with China to provide LNG for 27 years, going up to 2050. And they signed this deal one day after the World Cup had started. And the reason they signed this one day after the World Cup is mainly for two reasons. Number one, Qatar was absolutely shocked by the human rights accusations coming out of the Western papers everywhere. The fact that USA and other countries basically did, a boycott of the World Cup, a secret boycott. Because if you watch a lot of the games, you will see that when you watch the games, there's advertisement boards at the back. These advertisement boards had no major Western companies in them, and so a lot of kind of companies pulled out of the event because of these human rights abuses. And as you know, the media was absolutely slaughtering Qatar, and Qatar feels very, very let down. They feel like they've been stabbed in the back, mainly because they helped United States fight their war on terror. They've got a massive military base in Qatar, US military base, and they've used that to attack Iraq and Afghanistan, also to escape Afghanistan as well. So it's a very, very important base. So Qataris feel very, very let down by the West. It's only a few months ago when you had Scholz and Ursula coming to Qatar to beg for LNG deals with Qataris. And Qataris were basically didn't sign any deals with them, and they're waiting to get the best offer, and they're also waiting for long-term deals as well. And after the World Cup started, one day after, they realized, the West cannot be trusted. I mean, look at all of these human rights abuses. They could not trust the West anymore, so they went along and signed a very, very good deal with China, very cheap deal. And this basically means that China is the winner in this deal. And Qataris were absolutely shocked. I mean, I know Qataris, and I've spoken to a few about the human rights abuses and stuff. And the media has basically twisted everything again. They love to twist all the facts and figures. A lot of the foreign workers, basically, they've taken the statistics for the past five years or so, and if you look at the statistics, most of them, like 80 to 90% of them, died during the COVID time. So during COVID, many people died around the world, and a lot of these foreign workers died during COVID, and only a small percentage of them died in the construction industry. And if you look at the facts and figures around the world, a lot more people have died in the construction industry, same as Qatar. And then you have to look at Dubai as well. And you have people like Gary Lineker who said they're boycotting Qatar. But this guy, Gary Lineker, is such a big hypocrite because if you Google Gary Lineker and Dubai, you will see him holidaying in Dubai. Every year he goes to Dubai, and you see a lot of Western people going to Dubai and holidaying there. And these are the same people talking about, human rights, that foreign workers were dying in Qatar and stuff like that. However, how do you think Dubai was built over the past 20, 30 years? They used a lot of foreign labor. A lot of foreign people died during the construction of Dubai as well. But, they're not going to say anything about Dubai because they love to go in there on holidays and, enjoy themselves. Absolute hypocrites, absolute hypocrites. Also, the fact is, you cannot sit there and talk about human rights when you ignore what's happening in Palestine, when you ignore what's happening in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, even. You cannot sit and pick and choose, which country to shit on based on the Western narrative. If you stand for human rights, you've got to stand for all human rights, not just pick and choose. Like, millions of Iraqis died during the two Iraq wars, and was there anything close to what they're doing with raising money and support for Ukraine? Do you see anything like that happening when the West was blowing up innocent civilians in Iraq? So many people died in Afghanistan as well. Do you see any help for Afghanistan in social media? I mean, I went to the cinema the other day, and they were forcing me to pay for Ukraine, and I said no. I said take that money back. And, I would pay for the ticket because when I paid for the ticket, I realized they were charging me £1 extra. So I asked them, what is this extra £1? And they said, oh, this is for Ukraine. And I said, take that off because I'm not gonna bloody give money to Zelensky and his bunch of merry puppets. I'm not gonna sit here and do that. And the cinema people were like, okay, we'll take it off, we'll take it off. So they're basically forcing people to pay. Yeah, and a lot of companies, a lot of social media are doing it all over the world. But you don't see anything like that for Afghanistan. You don't see anything like that for Palestine. It's absolute pick and choose who they want and what they do. It's absolutely hypocritical. And then you have UAE as well. UAE has recently cancelled some F-35 fighter jets because they came with a lot of conditions. And one of the conditions was do not work with China, and do not allow China to invest in your country and things like that. And UAE basically said, you know what, stuff you guys, we're not going to agree to your ridiculous conditions. So they cancelled F-35 buys from the US, and in return, they bought some fighter jets from China. These are training jets they bought from China, and I believe they are basically looking at signing some Chinese jets in the future because you're not going to buy Chinese training jets if you don't buy Chinese jets in the near future. And I believe people in UAE are probably training how to fly Chinese jets and things like that. And in the future, there'll be some sort of deal. So you see, the Middle East is slowly moving away from the West. There's no trust left in the Middle East. The West has been absolutely abusing the Middle East for years. I mean, it all starts from Palestine, and you've seen what the West has been doing to Iraq, to Syria, to Yemen, to Afghanistan. All the problems in the Middle East all comes from the US. All the color revolutions, everything that all the problems, it's all down to the US and pushing some sort of a color revolution or invasion. So let's talk a bit about oil prices. They're still low compared to what they were in June, July. Back then, prices were around $120 per barrel. And right now, they're languishing between 70 and 80 or just over $80 per barrel. And I believe it's gone up very recently. It's going to start going up faster over the next few months. Basically, China has been looking to open up very soon. They have stopped all of their zero COVID stuff. However, I believe there's a lot of infections in China they're still fighting with. So they're not out of the woods just yet. So once they are out of the woods, I believe once China's economy is back on track, oil prices will start shooting up because it all does depend on the Chinese economy, how well things are doing in China. And also, you've got to understand that OPEC is going to be reducing 2 million barrels per day. Russia's recently said that they're going to be reducing their oil output as well. And United States has also been dumping a lot of their reserves. And that's going to have to stop sooner or rather than later. And they're going to have to fill up those reserves as well. That's going to build up demand. And also these EU price caps, which is absolutely ridiculous. They're going to mess about with the oil market as well. So I can see the next few months the oil prices start going up to like over $100, even $120. And this is definitely guaranteed to happen. And also, United States has recently created a no PEC bill as well. And this is basically a bill to counter OPEC plus. So we're not sure at what point that will take into effect as well. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be pushing up oil prices over the next few months. So what does Saudi Arabia want from all of this? Well, basically, number one thing, they want security. Because back then when they signed this deal with the United States, United States would provide Saudi Arabia security, and Saudi Arabia will in return sell oil in dollars. So this security thing is basically like if you open a shop in New York City, for example, if you open a shop in the Bronx, right, and you have a couple of gangsters coming into your shop, and they basically say, all right, you got to pay us, hundreds of dollars every week, and in return, we provide your shop security. And if you say no to them, what they're going to do, they're going to come back with baseball bats the next day and break down your whole shop. So this is the same sort of gangster principle that the US is running in Saudi Arabia. So if Saudi Arabia decide to say, no, we don't need your bloody security, get your US troops out, take your weapons, just leave us alone, what do you think the US would do? They're not going to go away quietly, are they? So, as you know, there are a lot of U.S. troops stationed in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has got a lot of U.S. weapons, F-35s. Obviously, they have maintenance contracts with them and stuff like that. So if the U.S. decides to stop supplying Saudi Arabia weapons and stop maintaining those weapons, then all of those weapons the Saudi Arabia have bought will be pretty much useless over the next few years. So they need to diversify. And I believe one of the security questions was discussed behind closed doors, and this is why President Xi went to Saudi Arabia so they can discuss this. This is not something that can be discussed over the phone because phones can be tapped, and so they had to discuss this privately, one-to-one. And I believe at some point in the future, if the BRICS takes off, maybe the BRICS will jointly have some sort of military department to that, or maybe it can be just a joint Russia-China alliance which will protect Saudi Arabia. China has already got a few bases they are building around Saudi Arabia, namely one in Gwadar. There's also one in Djibouti, which is not far from Saudi Arabia as well. And they're also, talking to Iran about building a base near the Iran waters as well, and a few other talks that's going in place. So it wouldn't go past me if Saudi Arabia decides to have some sort of joint military deal with Russia and China, and same way Russia and China will basically protect Saudi Arabia, same way Russia is protecting Syria, for example. So it'll be that kind of defense agreements. And also, Saudi Arabia will want to have, diversity of weapons. But that's not a problem because when you have Russia and China providing you weapons and military equipment, they are just as good, if not, just as good, if not some parts of it will be better than US ones, for example. Like the Patriots have been absolutely useless in Saudi Arabia. Even though Patriots were stationed near oil facilities, the Houthis still managed to, get past the patriots and attack these oil facilities. So imagine if they had S-500s or S-550s protecting those oil fields, and some some military stuff is better, than the US counterparts. So Saudi Arabia can't really lose there in that sense. So why is it important for China to have yuan, not just to have it as a world reserve currency, but basically have it maybe second or even third world reserve currency? Why is it important? Because China does not want to rely on the US dollar. And you've seen what's happened with the Ukraine war, where um, you know the West has basically sanctioned Russia, and they've taken about 300 billion from the central banks. China is more at risk because I believe there's almost 3 trillion in the central banks that the US can confiscate. So which is very, very bad news for China. So they want to try and diversify away from the dollar as fast as possible, because they can see a conflict happening with Taiwan over the next few years. And if there is ever a conflict over Taiwan, you can guarantee the West will do to China exactly what they did to Russia. And China wants to prepare for all of that. They have been trying to decouple from China ever since Trump was in power and he placed these ridiculous trade sanctions with China. And Biden has come on board and he's doing it even more. So recently, US has announced Huawei is going to be banned from accessing any USA banks, which is going to sanction them even further. And they've announced this Chip 4 organization with Taiwan, the island of Taiwan, South Korea, and also Japan as well. And they want these countries to basically not sell advanced chips to China or technology. They've also sanctioned more Chinese companies as of last week. I believe they announced more Chinese companies on the blacklist. They are not allowed to buy any high-end equipment or semiconductors from US companies or companies that use US technology like ASML. And in return, the share prices for semiconductor US companies has gone down. Like AMD has gone down by around 80%. Nvidia went down by 50%. Even TSMC shares have gone down as well. And there's stories about how TSMC EUV machines are basically gathering dust because a lot of companies have stopped placing orders because they don't have the same demand as they did last year. And you can see it's causing huge issues around Western semiconductor companies, and even in TSMC itself. And this is also going to push China to build their own semiconductor infrastructure. They have already announced they are building 7 nanometers, and that will go into mass production over the next few years. And they even, are building semiconductor machines as well. They're going to basically build their own EUV machines that will be coming out over the next few years as well. So this is just going to push them to try even harder. And if you don't believe me, just ask NASA, because I think, only a few years ago, NASA decided to ban China from the International Space Station. And guess what? China said, you know what? Screw you. We're just going to build our own. And look at China today with its space station. It's much better than NASA. They're building a moon base with Russia over the next few years as well. Many great projects coming out of China. And pretty soon, China's going to have the only international space station in space. The old International Space Station is going to be decommissioned because Russia has decided to pull out of it. And Russia is the only country that's actually keeping the International Space Station in orbit, because they use a specific specific engine to keep in orbit, and without that engine, it's just going to slowly burn away in the atmosphere. So without Russia's help, it's going to cost the West a lot more to keep the International Space Station up into space, and that's why they are looking to decommission the whole thing. So I believe within the next few years, China will announce 5 nanometers chips, or even photonic chips, or even something else, graphite chips, even, and and the West will basically be kicking itself because they used to sell 300 billion worth of chips to China at one point, and now that's gone down in half. So only companies that's been affected is not just China, but also the Western companies itself as well. So the Chinese have been dumping a lot of US bonds, as I've showed you in the beginning of the show. They know that the dollar is getting stronger, especially with the interest rate rises, and there's going to be more interest rate rises next year as well. And this is destroying the local currencies all around the world. It's destroying the yen, it's destroying the pound. And this is bad news. As the dollar gets stronger, you as a country will have to pay more uh, for for goods like oil and gas because these are still sold as US dollars. And so you need obviously to keep a huge reserve of US dollars to basically buy oil and gas around the world because that's what you call the petrodollar. And this is what keeps the dollar strong. Without the petrodollar, the dollar will just fall, and US will have a huge amounts of hyperinflation because all of these dollars that have been circulated around the world, all the countries will start dumping them even more, and they will eventually end up back in the US, and that will cause more inflation. China is also using the Belt and Road Scheme to internationalize their yuan. Countries like Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and many countries bordering China already using yuan to settle goods and services. And also, once China releases its digital yuan over the next few years, that's going to help internationalize the yuan even more. And don't forget, China has been building the Belt and Road Scheme and providing loans to 140 countries around the world. And they have been providing these loans in US dollars, but they will get the money back using the Chinese yuan. And that's how they get rid of the US dollar. And it's a very, very, very clever way of doing it, and very, very clever way of cleaning the money away from US dollars and start getting it back in Chinese renminbi. So also China is buying huge amounts of gold reserves, and they are the highest producer of gold in the world, but they're also the highest buyer of gold. And one thing that China is doing, they're buying gold, but they're not selling gold. So it's like a huge black hole of gold being dumped into China, and money and gold is not being taken out of China. And this is one of the reasons cryptocurrency was banned in China because people were using cryptocurrency to take money out of China. Now it's almost impossible to get huge amounts of money out of China. So this way, the money basically gets circulated in China and it's not used for money laundering and taken out of China as well. So it's not just China doing this. Russia is obviously doing it. Russia is buying huge amounts of gold as well, and they have already de-dollarized, mainly forced to be de-dollarized. Countries like Iran are doing it. Even countries which are um, uh, close allies of the United States are doing it. We're talking about Great Britain, we're talking about Israel, European countries as well, Belgium even. So it's not just countries that don't get along with the US. It's also US allies as well. And also, the trade war with the United States has basically forced China to diversify all of its imports. They used to get a lot of imports from United States. I'm talking about, soybeans, agriculture products. They used to buy Boeing airplanes. They used to buy loads of semiconductor chips. But nowadays, they are diversifying every single import because United States have still got these trade sanctions against China. They've got these ridiculous tariffs against Chinese goods. So China is now diversifying most of their goods away from the United States, and they're buying it from Argentina, Brazil. They're buying it from Russia. Russia and China trade has gone up by 100%, and it's going up by 100% every single year. A couple of years ago, it was 100 billion, and last year was 200 billion, and next year they're looking to go to 300 billion. They are building train links and road links every single year between the two countries, and this is going to basically link the two countries up even more, and which means their trade is going to be going up further and further. And plus, Russia can provide China with a lot of agricultural stuff, and they can provide China with soybeans and many other agricultural stuff. And don't forget, the parts of Ukraine in Donbass and Luhansk areas have got some of the best agricultural black soil, best fertile land in Europe. And so they can use that to obviously buy a lot more agricultural stuff that China needs as well. So there's a lot of stuff happening, not just from China, but the rest of the world who are de-dollarizing, who are basically diversifying away from US companies. And even the Europeans, even they would not admit it in public. The US is not really a good friend to have. Basically, Europe is deindustrializing, but US is taking full advantage of that. They are taking EU industry and companies away from the EU and putting them into United States with their ridiculous infrastructure bill, and many things. They are taking full advantage of the EU. They are selling them gas, LNG, oil at ridiculous prices. It's all down to them looking after themselves. They don't really care about the EU. So the whole world is seeing it, and countries like China, Russia, Iran, and a few other countries are now going to be pushing for BRICS. We're talking about India, we're talking about Brazil, Saudi Arabia, South Africa. The US has basically weaponized the dollar. They have shot themselves in the foot. They have overplayed their hand. And this is the result, basically, the world de-dollarizing as a result. And it's not going to be probably next year or the year after. The de-dollarization will take time. It's a slow process. Even though it's accelerating, I don't believe we're going to see true de-dollarization until there is another reserve currency in its place. So unless BRICS comes up with a new currency, new reserve currency, that's when we will see the de-dollarization go into full effect. But right now, when you de-dollarize, there really isn't much alternatives out there. So unless the world can come up with a new alternative, and I'm talking about the BRICS reserve currency, which is going to be based on gold and rare earths and silver and things like that, then you have an alternative. So think about it, guys. If you have a job that you absolutely hate, you absolutely hate your job, but you can't quit because you obviously got bills to pay, you got a mortgage, you got kids, you got to feed them, you got to house them. So you're not going to just quit your job, right, and say, "Yeah, I'm done with it." You're going to make sure you have another job to take its place. So this is the same principle. You're not going to suddenly stop using the US dollar. You need to have another reserve currency that will take its place that you will use instead. Then you can start dumping the US dollars. So this is the case until Saudi Arabia officially joins BRICS, and until BRICS officially announce this world reserve currency, I don't see much difference. Obviously, there is a lot of dumping of the dollars happening right now, but still, there's still a lot of dollars in circulation around the world. So it's not going to be a very fast process. It's going to be a very slow process. That's enough for me from today, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and support the channel as well. Thank you very much. Bye.